19, 20 years old. Does access to the pill, the ability to get the prescription for the pill, does it matter to how much you work? So this is taking an average number of hours per week times the number of weeks per year worked to get annual hours. Row 2, row 3, row 4, maybe row 5. But particularly rows 2 and 3, very strong results, and still statistically significant, but not as strong a result for the last two. So it also seems to indicate that women work more. So they're more likely to be in the labor force, that's column 1, and the number of hours they're working per year are greater if they lived in states in which 18 to 20-year-olds had access to the pill. Does the pill make a difference? Pill makes a difference. Access to the pill allows women to time their first birth, and the indication is that women who have access to the pill when they are 18, 19, 20 years old, therefore are less likely to get pregnant when they're 18, 19, 20 years old. They're more likely to be in the labor force. They're more likely to be working. But it doesn't affect the total family size. It affects the timing of fertility, doesn't affect the total fertility. Pretty cool result. One little pill. One little pill. All right, other demographic decisions. Shall I marry? Sometimes economists will use cost-benefit analysis as a way of thinking about the decision to marry. See, this is why you want to hang out with economists on a Friday night, because we're just so cool and fun. Economists will think about marriage as a cost-benefit decision, where the assumption is that the goal is to maximize the net benefit. Maximize the net benefit. There are benefits to being married. There are costs to being married. The idea here is that we're going to maximize the net benefit. What's the story? It's a story of specialization in trade. We are fun people, are we not? There's a whole book about this. It's called Spouseonomics. Came out a couple years ago. The idea of specialization in trade is that if you have two parties to a transaction, and those two parties have different opportunity costs of doing various activities, therefore one party has a comparative advantage in one of the activities and the other party has a comparative advantage in the other activity, and we know as good economists that if there are differences in opportunity costs that create comparative advantage, that there are gains from trade. That specialization in trade means that there'll be an increase in the total number of goods produced, right? So let's apply it to this. Let's talk about home production versus market production. Home production, producing meals, clean clothes, clean house, well-fed children who are raised, their homework is done, they're polite, all those sorts of things. They say sir and ma'am and all that good stuff. Market production, go to work, have a job, go to work, get some pay. So market production is producing goods for the market, which are then sold, which generates the income, which is used to which is used to purchase goods and services, as opposed to home production, which is the housework, raising of children and keeping the home. In the good old days, there were very strong differences in opportunity costs between men and women in the home production versus the market production. We had an educational system that created these comparative advantages. We had a culture that reinforced these comparative advantages. So some of us in the room, 1, 2, 3, 4, went to school in a time when women were required to take home economics, and the men were not allowed to. Take home ec? My men at the top? No. Could not take home ec. It was girls only. The boys all had to take some sort of shop class. They had to take wood shop or metal shop or auto shop, one of those shop classes. The girls were not allowed to. So we had an educational system that created differences in opportunity costs between home production and market production. And when there were those differences, those big differences in opportunity costs between home production and market production that created comparative advantages. Men had a comparative advantage in market production, women had a comparative advantage in home production. Then there's an economic logic for two individuals to come together, form a union, and specialize in trade. That the man specializes in market production. He's like Ward Cleaver, puts on his suit and tie every day, goes out the door, goes to work, we don't know what he did. And June stays home, vacuums, raises the children, makes sure the beaver is behaving himself and Wally's taking care of himself, does everything in high heels and curls. And specializes in home production. As a result of these specializations in home production and market production, the couple jointly has more of all the sorts of goods and activities they want to enjoy. They have happier, healthier children. They have more nutritious meals. They have more income to enjoy, more travel that they can do, more goods that they can purchase. As those differences in opportunity cost diminish, so that there's no longer as strong of a comparative advantage, you would expect to see less specialization in trade. If there's less of a comparative advantage between two individuals, you would expect, therefore, less specialization in trade. Translate it, if there's no longer such a big difference between the man's ability to make an income and the woman's ability to keep the home happy and healthy, you're going to see less marriage. And what do we get? Here come the data. All these numbers are in the handout from Tuesday. Table 4, percentage of married couples in which both partners are working has gone up from 39% in 1970 to around, let's call it 55% for the last 30 years. So there's been an increase in the number of percentage of couples in which both partners are working. People are getting married later or not at all. Table 5, the share of 30 to 34-year-olds who have never married. In 1970, 6% of women and 9% of men ages 30 to 34 had never married. In 2010, 27% of women and 36% of men ages 30 to 34 had never married. People are postponing marriage. When I was a senior in college, what were we doing? We were not on the job market. We were planning bridal showers. You remember that, yeah. We were planning bridal showers. Because we would have graduation on Saturday and weddings on Sunday. Yep. Yeah. So people would graduate on Saturday and then their wedding would be on Sunday because all the family came for graduation and they were all already there and they'd stay for the wedding. And so that's what happened for girls in their senior year in the 1970s. People got married straight out of college. I don't suspect many of you are working on bridal showers right now as you're preparing for commencement in a few weeks. Just a wild guess. And I'm hoping that no longer do your uncles say to the women when you go to college that you're going to get your MRS degree. MRS? What's MRS? Oh. Right. So that was, yeah, Leah. If women are planning to get married and be homemakers, why do they go to college? Because you can marry up. Because you'll find a better man and you'll have a better life if you can marry a college man than if you marry somebody who dropped out of college or just went to high school. Was there a marginal benefit for men to marry women that had a college education? Some people thought so because the children, so here, think comparative advantage. So if you marry a woman who has a college education, your children will be better off in terms of their education. Way up high. Why are the numbers significantly higher for men than for women? Don't know for sure. It's always been the case that men tend to marry someone, on average men will marry somebody a little bit younger than themselves. And so that's going to give you a little bit of difference in those numbers. But I don't remember any particular studies that look at it. Yep. In the right-hand side? Yeah. So looking at the right-hand side, so we've got here the median age at first marriage. So they ask people, what age were you when you first got married the first time? 50% above this number, 50% below. And there again, you can see remarkable increases over the last 40 years. From about 20 or so for women, now up to 26, and from about 22 for men, now up to about 28. So you're right. So the other thing here is the gap is a little smaller, right? So the gap here was 4 years, and the gap down here is 1.8 years. Is that what you're looking at? I'm sure that there is literature out there that has asked this question. I just am not familiar with it. So I'm not familiar with the literature on why the men marry later or why the gap is smaller. More people are living together, so getting married later doesn't necessarily mean coupling later. We have more couples who are living together. These numbers are from the census. Number of straight couples living together has increased by 2010 to about 5% of all households. That's quite an increase from 1970. Relatively stable over the last 12 years. Number of gay households, that's an underestimate because the question as to whether or not you are gay or lesbian is they tease this out by asking, are you, I forget exactly how they ask the question, but they ask a question that's voluntary to answer, and it's, are you living with somebody of the same sex? And then there's a way they ask the question that basically is, are you in a relationship with that person? And so it's believed to be an underestimate. The degree of the underestimation of the number of gay households should presumably decline over time as homophobia and heterosexism decreases in society, but at this point, those are the numbers we've got. So why marry when you can take Econ 113? What are women doing? They seem to be substituting college for marriage. So that the number of degrees, bachelor's, master's, and doctoral degrees that are earned by women have gone up dramatically over the last half a century. 1950, 24% of the bachelor's degrees in this country were earned by women, and now it's around 57%. And also for master's degrees from 29% in 1950 to about 60% today. Doctorate degrees, which includes both PhDs, MDs, and JDs, 14%, 50s and 70s, up to around half today. Cool. Yep. Yep. No, it means so 24% are women, which means 76% are men. 57% are women, which means 43% for men. Yeah. Yeah. Attitudes change. There's a survey that you take at CalSO that asks a whole bunch of questions. So do you consider yourself liberal or conservative and all these other things? They used to ask a question. They don't ask it anymore. In the true false, so they agree, disagree, violently disagree, violently agree, and someplace in the middle. They used to ask this question, do you agree or disagree with the statement, activities of married women are best confined to home and family? They no longer ask the question. But yeah, so in 1970, half of the people who answered the survey said yes, they agreed with that statement that the activities of women are best confined to home and family. Women do not belong in the labor force. That number declined to 25%, and then once it got down to 25%, they stopped asking the question. So we don't know if the number today would still be at 25%, or if the number would presumably be lower than 25%. I'm going to guess that half the room hopes that it's certainly lower than 25%. Yeah. But we did see a change in attitudes as well. All right, I have two different group things for today, and I'm much more excited about the one that's on the board than the one I had in the slides. So the one that I had in the slides, which I'm not going to do as a put you in little groups thing, but let's take. Why don't we take 5 minutes to talk about it as a big group? How's that work? Was this one. I was going to put you in small groups for this, but I got something else coming up that I'm more excited about. So the first question is, what were the explanations for fertility decline that we looked at earlier in the course? So somebody give me hands. What were the explanations we had before? Yep. Old age security motive. And so spread that out a little bit. So old age security motive, which said that. Okay. Okay, so the old age security motive, which was that people have one motivation for having children is to have somebody who take care of you when you're old, but if the opportunities off of the farm or away from the home are sufficiently alluring, your children may leave and not send you back money and not send you back cards and love and not take care of you when you're old and in diapers. And that would lead to people substituting, well, the original title for such an article was bonds or babies, 2 strategies for secure old age, would lead to people substituting savings, like buying bonds, as opposed to children, like having babies, as a strategy for old age. What was another story? So that was one story. There was another story that we had about why fertility went down. Declining infant mortality? No. Nice try though. Another one. Yep. Great Depression did have an effect on fertility, so we had a dip in fertility. There was, when we did old age security motive, we had another story that we said didn't work, but a lot of people had believed it for the North. No. Target bequest motive. So the idea that people have a certain number, they want to provide for their children, and so if they have a large amount of wealth, they can have a whole lot of kids because they can divvy that up pretty well. If they have a small amount of wealth, they have a few number of kids because there's just not as much wealth for the kids. So the target bequest motive. And that one said that the more expensive land became, the more difficult it became to accumulate land, and the more difficult it was therefore to provide your children with a sufficiently large farm to set up on their own, and people would have smaller families. That was a story that didn't work very well for the South, so they always just said, oh, forget about South. But seemed to work reasonably well for the Midwest. Yeah. Yes. Yep. Yep. That was the David and Sundstrom's were responding to. Dick Easterlin did the target bequest. Okay. Either of those stories, do they work for explaining the last, say, 30 or 40 years in decline in fertility? So people have fewer children today because their children are more likely to up and move and leave them and not take care of them when they're old. People have fewer children today than they did, say, 30, 40 years ago because it's harder to leave a big enough estate for your children if you have too many. Yeah. What if instead we thought about these decisions about fertility and sort of the cost-benefit calculus? And we said that the decisions to have children, how many children to have, is a weighing up of the benefits of having children, however those are defined, and the cost of having children. And that when the benefits exceed the costs, if the marginal benefit of the third child exceeds the marginal cost of the third child, that the family will have the third child. But when the marginal benefits of the third child are smaller than the marginal cost of the third child, they won't have the third child. That's sort of a broadly defined rubric for or model for explaining fertility. Does that work for the old stuff? Does that work for the 19th century? That decisions about having children are part of a cost-benefit calculus, and we're looking at what the benefits are versus what the costs are. Chrissy. Okay, so Griffin wants me to back up a little bit in terms of the target request motive, because she was nodding her head, yep, that one actually was relevant to today as well, that in terms of the cost of providing for children. So not necessarily how much you leave them when you die, right, what sort of estate you leave them, but the overall cost. Leah. Okay, so that's a good point, is that when we start talking about models about fertility for the 21st century and for the 19th century, can we make an assumption that people can control their fertility? Because there's no sense in talking about the decision to have how many children, the decision about how many children you're going to have in 1874 if women have no way of controlling their fertility in 1874. They clearly didn't have the pill, but they did have marriage age, they did have breastfeeding, but once again, let me repeat that breastfeeding is not an effective form of birth control. You can get pregnant when you are breastfeeding. It is not an effective form of birth control. You can get pregnant when you're breastfeeding. You're less likely to get pregnant when you're breastfeeding, but you can still get pregnant when you're breastfeeding. So I don't want any birth announcements in 2 years telling me too sad. So how well women can control their fertility. So let me go back to Bailey's thing. Did Bailey's piece about the pill, did her work about the pill say that the pill was affecting how many children women had? No, it was really about the timing, right? That it was not, that this form of birth control was not about affecting the number of children. That there were other factors affecting the number of children, but that it was about the timing of those children. So there were means. I take your point, right? The pill is certainly a much more effective form of birth control than any of the means that were practiced in the 1800s. Yeah. But can we think about the old age security motive as being a cost-benefit thing? Sure. Old age security motive, that's just a subset of cost-benefit analysis. That's specifying what's the benefit. The benefit is, will they take care of me when I'm 85 years old and can't talk very well anymore and wearing diapers again? Not a very pretty thought, but just to warn you, it does happen eventually. I know, your grandparents. Be very patient with your parents when your grandparents go through this. It's a really hellish experience. So that's the benefit, and then the cost is all the various costs of having children. So cost-benefit analysis is fine to apply in both the 19th century and the 21st century. We may want to reconsider what the benefits and what the costs are. So the old age security motive was not saying it's not a cost-benefit calculus. It's saying the benefit that people care about is old age security. All right, let me go on, because I want to get to the thing at the very end. Okay, Baruch. How much does women's labor force participation rate affect per capita? It's not going to affect per capita GDP, but it might affect per family GDP, right? So increase in women's labor force participation in terms of per capita GDP is going to depend upon what's the average earnings of women relative to the average earnings of men. We know the average earnings of women are less than the average earnings of men, so I would expect that on a per capita basis it would depress per capita GDP. But what it does do is it increases per household or per family GDP. So it increases incomes per family, even as it doesn't necessarily increase the on average over time income per capita. What was the second half of the question? How much would it have contributed to the... So if you're looking at the rapid growth of GDP, I guess by GDP per capita I'm thinking per worker. I'm thinking per worker. Yeah. No, I was thinking per worker. Sorry. Yeah. Per capita. Sometimes the P is Y. Yeah. I was thinking Y over L and not Y over P. So the Y over L, my answer was fine for Y over L. You wanted Y over P. So yes, it would increase Y over P because of the increase in L over P. Yeah. I don't know what share of the total increase in output is explained by women's labor force participation. It's been done. It's been answered. I just didn't know the answer. Immigration. All right. When we talk about immigration after World War II, we still are talking about a period of restrictions. So remember, these restrictions began in the early 20th century. So Professor Such talked about some of this, and I emphasized some of it as well. So he talked about the Chinese Exclusion Act of 1882. There was also pages law. There were other laws, I think, I wrote it down, that were both earlier and later that also restricted immigration from Asia. And then, of course, there were the big two immigration restrictions, the most important ones to remember, that's worth 5 points on midterm too, which were the 1921 and 1924 immigration quotas. 1921, which said that the number of people who migrate from each country in any given year can be no more than 3% of the population from that country as recorded in the 1910 U.S. Census. 1921 said 3% of the 1910 census. So they're called national origins quotas. There's a quota, a quota of the number of people who can come into the U.S. defined by national origin, that is by country of origin. And the quotas are set by taking a percentage of the population from that country that was in the U.S. in some census. In 1921, the law was 3% of the 1910 census. That was too loose. It was very tight. It was too loose. 1924, Immigration Act said 2% of the number who were from each country in the 1890 census. So in 1924, the immigration quota was, in each year, the number of people who can come from, say, Sweden is no more than 2% of the number of Swedes who are recorded in the 1890 census, U.S. Census. Moving the date to 1890 meant it pushed it back before the waves of migration from Southern and Eastern Europe. So it favored Northern Europe and Western Europe. So it favors England, Scotland, Ireland, Wales, France, Spain, disfavors Italy, Poland, Russia, and so on. And 2%, of course, is smaller than 2%. All right. So I'm going to run through the legal changes. I'm going to try to do this really fast because I want at least 10 minutes for the last thing. The